Mega Man X5, released in 2000, 2001 for Sony PlayStation and also for Windows. Guess which one I got back in the day first? The Windows version on CD-ROM, which I still have, and I tried to run and it works amazingly enough in Windows 10. It crashes when I try running it in the virtual PC, Windows XP Virtual Console, whatever it's called, but in Windows 10 it runs fine, but it won't read my keyboard. Probably because it's a USB keyboard and not the old keyboard powered by serial. Oh well, there's a legacy collection for modern PCs anyways, but if I ever find a way to get this keyboard thing fixed, maybe find an older model, then we'll give this Windows version another shot, who knows. It's too bad though, this version has a nicer font, but whatever. So Mega Man X5 was intended to be the end of the series and transition to the Mega Man Zero series, since that was the Inf King's one true love. But then Capcom made more Mega Man X games and so it wasn't. Instead, Mega Man X5 became the game where the series started falling off the rails, assuming there were rails to begin with. I'm not going to sit here and say that X5 is a bad game because it isn't, but it was the first time playing a Mega Man game that left me with an uneasy feeling as though something wasn't right. Mind you, I've played a bunch of bad Mega Man games, some worse in quality than this, but none of them left as much of a bitter taste in my mouth as X5 did. And for as long as I can remember, I could never quite figure out why that is. Mega Man X4 started the PlayStation run proper on a positive note. A new playable character in Zero, a new art style, it kept things simple, relatively fun game, more than enough of a good base to build a sequel on. And then X5 decided things needed shaking up, and to be fair, the formula was a bit on the stale side of things at this point, and so changes were made and introduced to the franchise, and not all those changes were for the better. Let's start with the simplest change. Shots no longer passed through solid objects. No longer can you cheese enemies by shooting lemons through walls. Now there's actual physics and your basic pea shooter is blocked off by a crate or a slab of rock somewhere. Weapon, and your buster shot's inability to pass through solid objects. Why is that a good thing exactly? Are you fucking kidding me? God damn it, the poor guy can only shoot left or right. The shots, the lemons, stop it. Oh fuck this game, I'm going back to Super Nintendo. Oh yeah, this is where it began, kids. This is the bane of my existence. Of all the things to call the first sign that something is amiss, this seems the least significant. But lemons through walls have been a staple of Mega Man since the very first game, in 1987, used to overcome the reality that our hero can only shoot left or right. And now you don't even have that. And while some enemy projectiles also have this setback, some others do not, and that sucks. So that put me in a foul mood, and there's still plenty of game left to go. It's the first time we're introduced to Alia, your navigator who will chime in, give you data on the level that you're going to play, this next segment you're going to play, and let you be on your way. Thing is, it happens every so often, in almost every level. It eventually becomes very intrusive and downright insulting to have this much hand-holding, and there's no way to turn it off. You know, there's no option in the options menu where you could turn this off. You're stuck with these constant popping boxes every single time, and you will learn to hate Alia in this game. Not a good first impression for a new major character, I'm afraid, but whatever. And also, for the first time ever, Mega Man can duck. Useful for hitting shorter foes or lower targets, assuming you remember it's even a thing, but there you go. You can now duck. Have fun. Alright, I guess we should dwell into this game, see if there's any other bad ideas that Capcom has concocted here. I'm sure we'll find some. So you begin a new game and you have a choice between playing as X, the Mega Man of the story, and Zero, who brandishes a saber for close-quartered swordplay. This is not a permanent choice as you're given the choice of hero before each stage later on. This initial choice determines what additional perk you gain. For example, if you pick X, you start off with the armor from X4, complete with air dash, hover, and plasma shot. If you pick Zero, he gains a buster shot that is rather useless due to it being slow, weak, having a long windup, and it can only be used on the ground. Not only that, but picking Zero means X loses his armor, which means you're stuck with vanilla X until you get the new armors, which won't be for a while. So this screen is essentially a choice of perk. Versatile armor for X, or a shitty blaster for Zero. The choice should be plainly obvious. Once you clear the introductory level and endure the forced pop-up text boxes that pop up every 5 seconds, Jesus Christ, you get the traditional stage select with 8 Mavericks to take on. 8 Mavericks with some badass names like the Skyver, Izzy Glow, and everybody's favorite badass, Duff McWhalen. The recent Legacy Collection ditched the Guns N' Roses inspired names for the translated original Japanese names, which are kinda lame, but hey, at least the fans are happy that they got the proper and better and superior Japanese originals over what we got originally. You know what? Those fans could go fuck themselves. Look, I'll take Axel the Red over Spike Rose Red, Grizzly Slash over Crescent Grizzly, and yes, Duff McFucking-Whalen over Tidal Whale. A shiny fire? No. Izzy Glow for life, motherfuckers. Fuck you. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, right. So you've got 8 stages to choose from as traditional with Mega Man, but only 4 of them are story vital at the moment. See, the space colony Eurasia is on a collision course with Earth, and you've got 16 hours to destroy this colony, with 1 stage visit costing you 1 hour. 4 Mavericks possess parts to fix a super laser that will try to blow up the colony and should be your primary concern. Should that fail, the remaining Mavericks possess parts for a space rocket that's used as a backup plan. In any event, should time expire or should both gimmicks fail, which can happen even after you killed all 8 Mavericks and gained all the parts possible, the colony crashes into Earth, causing massive damage, turning 0 Maverick, making him unplayable essentially, and you get the bad ending, which, ironically enough, is the closest thing to a canon ending you have in this game, if Mega Man X6 is anything to go by. Oh shit, my head hurts. Now you can attempt to use the gimmicks to shoot down the colony from this screen here, and if successful, you can open up the final stages immediately, circumventing the need for defeating all 8 Mavericks to unlock the final stages, as tradition. In theory, you can pull this off before even attempting 1 stage, but the chances of this succeeding is extremely random, and while getting the associated parts means a greater chance of success, you're still relying on what the cool kids call RNG. Is that some new drug or something? To pull it off. Like I said, even if all 8 Mavericks are defeated, you have all the possible parts you need for everything, there's still a very good chance that you will fail miserably, and this happened to me a couple of times, so basically everything is up to chance, and this whole escapade, Maverick hunting, part fetching, all of it, is a complete and utter waste of time, but for the sake of the game and the video, let's pretend it isn't and keep going. In terms of the actual legwork, it's the typical Mega Man fare. You run through levels, you kill the boss, you gain weapons for X and moves for Zero. A rather nice selection of weapons for X to use this time around, while Zero has some recycled moves to go along with some new ones, or something to that extent. As mentioned, you now have a crouch ability that is useful for dodging hazards or hitting low, but there's also a new rope scaling ability where you latch onto ropes and you ride along them. It's a neat little thing if nothing else, and provides a new element of challenge to the game, particularly in regards to segments built around skilled use of this function. Along the way, you'll encounter reploids that need to be saved, and these equate to extra lives and maybe a boost in energy, making them somewhat superfluous in the long run, but don't worry, they'll find a way to ruin your lives in future games. And of course, the usual diverting from the beaten path to find the usual heart containers, sub-tanks, and armor parts for X. Be warned that while sub-tanks and weapons are shared between X and Zero, heart containers are not. So if X claims a heart, he'll get the life boost and not Zero. Something to keep in mind when hunting for these containers. As far as armor is concerned, X can get parts for 2 new sets of armor. The Falcon armor, which has a shitty pea shooter for a charge shot and is unable to charge weapons, but has a temporary flight ability that's fairly useful. And the Gaia armor, which is more heavy duty, moves like a tank, can't use special weapons, but is impervious to spikes. It's useful for special instances only and not much else. The caveat introduced in X5 and also implemented in X6 is that in order to use these armors, you have to gain all 4 parts. You cannot use the individual parts beforehand, nor can you mix and match parts from the 2 sets of armors or anything else like that. Now, while this feels a bit limiting and a bit of a downgrade, I'm actually okay with this. It makes sense from a story perspective, keeping the armors locked away to prevent its exposure to the rampant Sigma virus, and also from a gameplay perspective, where the armors are basically extra characters you play with, as opposed to pieces of equipment that you implement. Besides, if you made the smart decision, you'd already have the 4th armor on hand, and later in the game, you can find a hidden capsule that gets you the ultimate armor, which is also available as a cheat. So that's up to 4 different armors that X can use. See, there's nice things to say about X5. Another unique element to X5 is the Sigma virus, physical manifestations of which look like purplish Sigma heads, similar to the one that you fought in the intro level. These are found throughout the game, chasing you around, and cannot be harmed without some specific part equipped. Basically, contact with a number of Sigma virus head things will cause infection and your vulnerability to the virus indicated by this virus gauge on the bottom left. Infection differs between characters. For X, it means gradual damage, while Zero gains temporary invincibility. It's a nice touch that hints at Zero's somewhat dubious origins, which is something of a plot point in this entry. Yeah, the story kinda sorta makes sense this time around. It's not a stupid thing like Repliforce in X4 or a complete waste of time like Doppler in X3. Sigma infects the Earth, sends a space colony to crash. Zero may or may not go bad. It's simple, it's straightforward. It explains some of the newer elements like the locked armor bits and the Sigma virus bits, and it tries to bring things full circle with its callbacks and trying to tie some loose ends together, that sort of thing. They tried their best to try to give this a grand finale sort of thing. And then there's the part systems, which... So look, you'll notice that bosses have levels now. As time passes, these levels will gradually increase, and so will the length of their health meters, quite frankly. Basically, when you beat a boss, you not only gain their powers, but you also have a choice of extending your life meter or your weapons capacity. When you beat Mavericks that are level 8 or above, you'll also earn special parts that can be equipped on the parts screen, ranging from character-specific bits such as improved firing capabilities for X to more general antiviral measures and such. The caveat here is that bosses only hit level 8 after you've blown a few hours off the clock, so to get the good parts you have to die multiple times until you're able to fight bosses at level 8 or above, and then you get the good parts when you're almost out of time and your crashes. The thing is, fuck off with that noise. Why do I have to waste hours of Earth time to fight a high-level boss to get a part? Why can't I just kill the boss and get the part? Why do I have to guess which part is which? Why don't you tell me which part is which so I know what I'm getting? Much like you're giving me a choice of either life or ammo extension. Why am I even fighting bosses for extra parts? Shouldn't the weapon be enough of a reward? Why can't I find these items out in the wild like other enhancements? Why can't the replicates I rescue give me the parts so they'd have some purpose in the game? Why isn't there a shop mechanic where I could buy these parts for some sort of currency like any sensible game with Mega Man on the marquee? Why bother with extra parts to begin with? What's the point of all this?
What am I fighting for?
Nothing. You're fighting for nothing, Zero. And the reason you're fighting for nothing is because no matter what you do, no matter what equipment you get, no matter what decision you make, no matter how much time you accomplish the tasks needed to be done, your fate is chosen at random, and this whole campaign is a complete and utter waste of time. And yet, the big problem with this game is that we've named Mavericks after a rock band, instead of keeping the old names like Title McQueen or Shiny Horan and fuck off. This, of course, applies only if you're playing on normal or extreme difficulty. X5 introduces proper difficulty settings. There's also a game speed setting, but that's another story entirely. Playing on easy means that everyone stays at level 1, which means you earn no parts. If I could be honest, this is probably the best way to play Mega Man X5. It cuts the clutter, keeps the bullshit to a minimum, keeps things relatively simple, and all that's left is the actual game, which is, well, it's a Mega Man game. Controls well enough, perhaps a bit sluggish in response at times compared to what came before, but still solid. The core bits still work. The weapons you gain are actually pretty decent, all things considered, especially when some of them are powered up. Zero, his moveset's pretty much similar to what you got in X4, but there's some new stuff in there too. So, that's something, I guess. Yeah, aspirin for the headache. Closing in on the 13-minute mark. Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, so Yeah, the parts system blows. My shots being blocked by solid walls piss me off. Alias constant intrusions break the pacing of the game, and to make matters worse, the levels are kinda shit. Mind you, there's some decent ones in there. Izzy Glow's castle stage with the crushers and the laser traps is kind of fun, even if it does have a terrible stairwell segment, compared to the ones in X4 at least. I like the train segments in Grizzly Slasher stage, even though it's somewhat derivative of the train level from the previous game. And I just love the opening speeder segment in Squid Adler's stage where the announcer says ready and I fall right into a pit. Pure fucking genius. But then you got the Skyver's Air Force level, bouncing between trying to disarm bombs before they blow up and taking slow elevator rides. Dark Dizzy has a nice segment where you touch arrows to flip the entire stage, somewhat reminiscent of Cyber Peacock's thing with the balls. I actually like that segment, it's a pretty fun segment, but before you get to that, you have to deal with constellations that turn into bats and spikes and slow the game to a crawl unless you're playing a collection of sorts. And while Duff McWhalen is a badass name for a badass whale, his stage is just bad. An auto-scroller where you have to deal with the submarine all throughout. I mean, why? Why? Fucking why? Why? I find all these issues that X5 has, and the one thing that these fans complain about are the names of the fucking Mavericks? Fuck you! Fuck you! It's coming back to me actually, now that I think about it, that sickening feeling that I had playing X5 that I sort of mentioned at the beginning there. Especially once you get to the final stretch, the final levels of the game, where they bring back the Quickman lasers, they bring back the devil complete with music, they bring back the X1 face thing, also with music. There's a capsule in one of the levels you could find if you're playing Vanilla X to get the ultimate armor, the same one from X4, because Dr. Light believes you shouldn't go on without proper equipment, and then I beat Zero as Vanilla X because fuck it, I don't care. They even brought in the disappearing blocks from the classic series, where I don't believe they ever used an X up to that point. See, there are these little nods and touches to the game, whether it be blatant callbacks like the aforementioned bits, possible loose ends needing to be resolved, or something perhaps a little more subtle that a longtime fan would appreciate if they paid enough attention. Like how the Zero levels share a similar layout or two to a couple past Mega Man levels and employing similar tricks and traps. The one up on the ledge of the beginning of the first Zero level would have been a heads up to those in the know. These are touches that could be appreciated under any other circumstance and perhaps any other game, but in the case of X5, they serve as reminders of simpler times, and better games I could be playing right now instead of this. And that's not the kind of feeling you want to invoke when you're doing these callbacks. Hey, did you know they added a ranking system to X5? They did. You start off at a certain rank, B for X and SA for 0, and as you play that rank would eventually go up. At the end of each play session, you go to the results screen where various stats show up. The number of Mavericks you killed, the damage you've taken including lives lost, and the time it took for you to complete the level. Yes, Mega Man X5 times your runs. Mega Man X5 has the fucking temerity to time your runs while giving you bullshit stages like this. And the Guns N' Roses names was the one critical thing that absolutely needed to be changed in the later versions. Fuck you and fuck your legacy collections. Mega Man X5 shares a similar graphical style to X4, which means some reused sprites, enemies, and whatnots to be found here and there. The overall graphical quality has seen a bit of a dip, however, mostly in regards to the level aesthetics. In terms of the sprite work, the new enemies, Maverick bosses, and the Reploids you have to rescue, the generic designs, they look fine for the most part. And mind you, some levels look fairly decent. The castle level, the train level, the level in space with the constellations despite the slowdown. Even the Zero levels have a nice Matrix-esque vibe to it with the background and stuff. But for the most part, some are bland, like the all-red cave and the all-brown cave or the wooden cave. It's not a bad looking game for the most part. Not as many awkward looking pre-rendered stuff, save for some of the larger boss elements which look awful. But X5 could have benefited from some nicer looking environments for you to partake in. More lush forestry beauty and less pre-rendered stuff that's subpar by Reboot standards. Anyone remember Reboot? Old CG cartoon from Vancouver? No? Okay, then nobody's gonna get that. X5 also does away with the anime cutscenes of the previous game, opting for the more simplistic, static imagery and beeping text. Your mileage may vary as to whether it's a step above or below what came before, but at least the artwork's well done, so that's something. And then there's the audio component, with some recycled sound effects to complement some newer ones and only the most minimum of voice bites. This is fine, even though there's a strange echo quality to some of these sound effects. But the soundtrack's actually top-notch stuff. Perhaps even better than soundtrack selection in X4. Some great banging rock tunes to keep the groove going, some more mellow pieces that invite a more relaxed yet unsettling tone, some befitting dramatic tunes, and there's even a couple recycled tunes added in for good measure that I found to be pretty good. Probably better remixes than what would be found in later games actually. How about that? Something nice to say about Mega Man X5. It's been a long time coming. I started this video in the same state that I started the game. I knew it was the game that changed things and gave off an uneasy vibe whenever I played it, but I figured it's not going to be that bad. If anything, compared to what comes along afterwards, this is probably the best of the bunch by default. And on the surface, just playing the game for the most part, the experience was somewhat pleasant. Some fun boss fights, some fun levels, some good weapons. Armor variety's nice, some high stakes in the plot. And then you toss in the bullshit, subsequently burying the few highlights that X5 had going for it. You had some fun levels, sure, but you also had some really wretched ones. A rather nonsensical part system, pointless reploid saving, a ridiculous ranking system, all this padding for the sake of padding, even the little things like getting parts needed for the colony killing gimmicks only to end up failing to commit the deed anyway, or the constant interruptions of gameplay, or shots being blocked by solid walls after dozens of Mega Man games where lemons went through shit unabated. Hell, they even made lives pointless, as continuing after a game over instead of restarting you at the beginning of the level lets you resume from the last checkpoint as if you merely lost another life, removing the whole point of lives and game overs which mattered in past Mega Man until now. As time went on, my enjoyment waned as I came across more minor things to pile to the list. Going through the final stretch of the game, seeing it bring back some classic gimmicks and tying some loose ends here and there, it was clear that the NF King and his crew wanted to bring a close to the old school way of Mega Man in the most epic way possible. X5 was going to be the final chapter of not just the X series, but the formula that had been part of Mega Man lore since 1987. And after this, it was off to Mega Man Zero, the beginning of a new era where the series would evolve into something deeper, more plot-driven, more open-ended, more generic. But much like a lot of the NF King's mighty ideas, Mega Man X5 failed to stick the landing and became this bloated mess of a game that felt less like a celebration of Mega Man and more like a funeral. And when the final blow was delivered to Sigma and the end credits rolled, I walked away from the game with no sense of accomplishment, no sense of satisfaction, joy, or even a hint of relief that it was all over. But rather, I stepped away feeling morose, depressed, and something else. And if this had been the end of the series, man, what a miserable note to end it on. Now, of course, the X series kept going, and things never quite reached the high point of the earlier games. Mega Man X5 was no longer the end of the series, but was rather the point of no return. The critical blow that caused this entire base that started with the earlier games to crater and collapse under its own weight. Other games would try to bring things back to that upper echelon that the first 4 games in the series enjoyed, but it was never going to happen. X5 was scorched earth both in narrative and gameplay, and all the subsequent games could do was salvage what was left standing and make the most of it. So if this video review thing feels a bit more long-winded than the usual output, first off, my condolences. I try to keep these things usually short, but this is one of those rare games where there's no easy answer and there was some deep thought put into it, amazingly enough. Of all the games I've sampled and wrote off as a mixed bag, Mega Man X5 is perhaps the most mixed bag of all. It's the cliched, I wanted to like this game, but I just couldn't, sort of thing. Perhaps more so than X6, which was a far worse game. Ultimately, my biggest takeaway is that had things been kept simple or at least more streamlined, would have been a perfectly fine addition to the Mega Man X series, and there's hint of that underneath, which is why I can't really call this a bad game. But it got too ambitious for its own good, had all these ideas that were poorly implemented, and came off worse because of it. Somewhat controversial considering this game has its fans, and it's generally viewed upon favorably, but the way I see it, Mega Man X5 shat the bed, and the rest of the series had to sleep in it. But yeah, all the problems this game had that might have benefited from a little tweak, a little fix or two, and apparently the one thing that absolutely needed the most fixing was excising Duff McWhalen from canon. Fuck off.